All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here for our Keep Virginia Blue briefing. Excuse the tech issues that we've had coming into this. We have an incredible run of show today. We're joined by Marge Baker, our executive vice president, Charniele Herring, the majority leader of the House of Delegates in Virginia, Dolores Huerta, the great civil rights icon, co-founder of the UFW. Josh from our staff, who's in Alexandria, will get the current state of the race. And I'll be talking about what our right-wing watch team has found. This weekend, I was down in Virginia on the trail for Terry McAuliffe, and I got to tell you, there is a hateful wind blowing across the state. Youngkin, the candidate for governor on the GOP side, had recently had a rally with Donald Trump, where the crowd pledged allegiance to a flag that was carried during the January 6th insurrection. Youngkin's made it clear that he intends to roll back the clock in the state every way he can on women's rights, on LGBTQ equality. His closing argument ad is an ad attacking Toni Morrison's Beloved and pushing the need to, frankly, strip students' curricula of books that actually speak to the truths of the slavery that in many ways defines the deep history of the state. And he has knelt and pledged fealty to Donald Trump in a profound way. When it comes to COVID, he says that Governor DeSantis of Florida, the governor of Texas are his guiding lights. He really wants to Texify Virginia when it comes to fighting COVID, which of course is just the opposite. It would just make life more miserable. And so that is what we're dealing with in Virginia, the state that has had a Democratic governor for the last 12 years, a state that we've built a trifecta there. Democrats control every branch. A state that has leapt forward, abolishing the death penalty the last couple of years, legalizing cannabis, passing their own state Voting Rights Act to advance access to the ballot box, the time when every state to the south of them is attacking voting rights. That state is the state that Terry McAuliffe seeks to lead, and we are excited about his leadership. He is somebody who has shown tremendous courage on voting rights. Virginia is one of the two states that has a lifetime ban on anybody who's ever been convicted of a felony ever voting again. Terry McAuliffe re-enfranchised 173,000 Virginians. It meant signing clemency orders restoring their voting rights for 173,000 people. I don't think you'll find any governor who's, frankly, ever sat down to sign 173,000 sheets of paper to restore people's voting rights. But that's the type of courage and commitment that Terry McAuliffe has. And he's had tremendous courage when it comes to standing up to defend the rights of all Virginians and of immigrants to the state. So with all of that on the line, we're going to open this up to a really robust conversation. Marge Baker, our executive vice president, really leads our efforts to advocate on a wide range of issues. She's been knee deep in Virginia, really trying to figure out what a Youngkin administration could mean for the state and what a McAuliffe, coming back could mean for the state as well. That I'm going to turn it over to Marge Baker.
Hey, thank you so much, Ben. And the stakes in this election could not be higher, as you suggest. I mean, for one thing, this is a question of the momentum we need heading into the 2022 midterms, which are going to be absolutely critical. We need the morale boost. We need the momentum heading into those elections. And the last thing we want to do is make the far right that Youngkin is tied to feel empowered by this election. You've mentioned a lot of things in terms of what it would mean to have a Youngkin as governor. Again, as somebody who would support banning the books of a Pulitzer Prize winning Black woman author, who supports abortion bans, who's opposed to marriage equality, who kowtows to insurrectionists in the face of a really, really important congressional effort to get to the bottom of what happened in the January 6th insurrection. A governor who will take a hard anti-science line around dealing with COVID, driven by the far right, and someone who proudly embraces the endorsement of far right groups like the Family Research Council. So that's what a Youngkin administration would mean, and we just cannot afford to go backwards. Ben has talked about a difference that Terry McAuliffe would make. And one other point I want to make, and then want to hear from the others on this panel, is Virginia is a critical state in passing the National Popular Vote Compact that would finally return us to a system where we are rid of the Electoral College and actually elect presidents based on who gets the most votes. So Virginia is critical in that regard to our whole national agenda. Stakes could not be higher. We are in this. We've been in Virginia for years. We're going to win this, but it's going to take everybody turning out and understand what it means to go forward with Terry McAuliffe, or go backwards, deep dive backwards with Youngkin. So thank you to all of you for joining us. And I think now, Ben, we're turning this over to
Charniele Herring.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And I thank everyone for joining us. And I'd like to thank PFAW so much for your partnership, especially when it comes to our House races. And so, yes, we've got to elect Terry McAuliffe. Hala is our Lieutenant Governor, and Mark Herring, and we've made significant gains in Virginia, and I'm extremely proud of it. And let's just take, for example, voting rights. I remember I was there when we were sitting in a super minority. We only had 32 delegates out of 100 in that House legislature, and Virginia passed some of the most repressive voting laws in Virginia. Among them, the voting ID law made it more difficult for people to vote. And time again, Democrats introduced legislation like early voting, Sunday voting, and extended hours for our polls, and they kept getting killed. In the past 2 years, we have actually removed some of the most repressive laws, like the voter ID law, and moved Virginia's ranking in the nation from number 49 to number 12 when it comes to casting a ballot. So in Virginia, we do now have early voting. In Virginia, we do now have Sunday voting. And we are going to continue to move the ball forward. Ben mentioned the automatic restoration of rights. I was so proud to introduce that piece of legislation this year. And it was Terry McAuliffe who actually came to the hearing to testify in favor of that bill. But why it's important to keep the majority is that we've got to pass it again in order for us to amend our Constitution. So we will finally have a black letter law. Not only will there be an automatic restoration of rights for those who have served their time, but there will be black letter law that also says in our Constitution that there is a fundamental right to vote for every Virginian. With the environment, again, with a Democratic majority in 2 years, we've been able to pass some of the most expansive environmental stewardship laws, like RGGI, putting caps on carbon, but at the same time bringing money into the state to address our sea level rise and help those who are in need with their utilities. We passed a Virginia Clean Economy Act to reduce our carbon emissions and create an infrastructure when it comes to wind and solar power and actually job creation. And we also passed the Environmental Justice Council, which will provide a seat at the table for all people, including members of our indigenous tribes, to advise about projects that are happening in the Commonwealth and its impact on communities. Reproductive rights, another area where our Democratic majority went to work to repeal non-evidence-based laws regarding access to reproductive health care for women. And we also expanded access to birth control. And one of my passions is criminal justice reform. Not only did we reimagine our criminal justice system here in Virginia, we put it to work. We repealed the death penalty. We passed legislation sealing convictions for minor crimes. And this actually comes from not independent studies that show that African Americans and Hispanics have a higher rate of arrest and conviction for marijuana possession. We have actually sealed over 300,000 records now in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And why is that important? It means that these individuals now have better access to employment, housing, access to capital to start a business. That's very important. We also raised the age when juveniles can be tried as an adults, because we believe and we know that children are children, and we need to make sure that we are fostering them and addressing what caused them to commit a crime. We provided writs of actual innocence and established the Office of Civil Rights in the Attorney General's office. And with our economy, this is the last area I want to touch. Virginia is a strong place when it comes to our economy. We have a strong economy. Past 2 years with our Democratic majority and our Democratic governors, we've been named best place to do business. But at the same time, and what's very important, is our ranking has risen when it comes to the best place for workers. Our unemployment rate is low. It's at 3.8%, and we are going to continue to keep working and continue to accomplish, but we cannot do it without your help. I will tell you, everyone in that state legislature is up. And if Republicans gain the majority, all of those successes, we'll lose them. Just that's plain and simple, we'll lose them. I believe that we are certainly at a crossroads, and especially not only in this nation, but in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have made so much progress for many. And if we choose, and the power is in our hands, either to work for these candidates, make phone calls, and do what we can to return them to the state legislature, and then we keep our Democratic majority. Because if we do, this will be the first time in a generation where we're continuing a path for progress instead of moving backwards. And so I just want to thank everybody for all your help, and I want to thank PFAW for your support and your partnership in our quest. Thank you.
Thank you, Charniele. And let me just say, if you can give to the efforts, please do. We're in the final stretch. We've spent more than 15 times more than we ever have on a governor's race in Virginia, because members across the country are so passionate about making sure that we keep Virginia blue, that down there in the old cradle of the Confederacy, we keep progress moving forward, and that in this, which is really the kind of first big test of the Democrats' power in the midterms, that we win. And so if you're able to give, please do. You can just go to pfaw.org/VAGOTV, pfaw.org/VAGOTV. That's to volunteer, and to give, pfaw.org/supportVA, pfaw.org/supportVA to give. And we need your work, and we need your wealth in this final stretch, and there are ways to help from wherever you are. Next, we have the incredible, the incomparable, and the tireless Dolores Huerta. When it looked like Gavin Newsom might lose in California, Dolores dug in. She's been a week on the road, traveling up and down the state. She's in her 10th decade of life, and she is really has more energy than anybody I know. And she's about to get on the ground for Terry McAuliffe here in the final stretch and do the same thing here that she did there, which is to help him bring in the win. So next, I'd like to go over to our board member, the great Dolores Huerta.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you, everybody who's here on this panel today. Yes, I know how important it is that we re-elect Terry McAuliffe. In terms of the Latino community, he has done so much for the Latino community. Helping people get their driver's licenses, by the way, was a very important issue there, because many people were not able to go to work because they couldn't get a driver's license. But Terry made that happen when he was governor. And all of the gains that were just mentioned right now, of course, impact the Latino community in a very big way. And I also do want to mention the Equal Rights Amendment. Democrats, it's so important the Democrats get reelected to the House there in Virginia, because had it not been for Virginia becoming the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, we wouldn't even be talking about it right now. Although we know that it's in the U.S. Senate right now, and that we have to try to get the Senate to be able to vote to make the Equal Rights Amendment and make that part of the Constitution for all of the women here in the United States of America. You know, it's important. A lot of women don't even realize that we don't have the equal rights in our Constitution in the United States. But Virginia, the Democrats in Virginia, you made this a possibility. We don't know where it's going to go. We're hoping and praying that the U.S. Senate will ratify the Equal Rights Amendment to make that happen. But we do have to remember that it was the Democrats in the state of Virginia that finally made it a possibility to even have it in our U.S. Senate right now. So I know that the Latino vote is extremely important for Virginia. When Terry was elected, the very first time that he ran for governor, there were, I think, 63,000 voters that voted for the Democratic Party. Terry McAuliffe won his governorship with 60,000 votes. And so it was the Latino community that put him over the top. Now, when that happened, there were only 8% of the population in Virginia were Hispanics. Well, now that has grown to 10%. So, you know, we know that we have to make a really, really big push to make sure that we get our Latino community out there to vote. We know that the state of Virginia is so important because it is also so symbolic. When we think of the state of Virginia, which is really part of the South of this country, and when we see what is happening in all of these southern states where they're passing all of these laws to suppress people of color, suppress their right to vote, what's happening in Texas, what's happening in Florida, and all of these other states, we know that the state of Virginia is absolutely crucial, because Virginia is the symbol of democracy in our country, the symbol of democracy. And so this symbol is so important, especially right now in this moment that we have this critical moment where we are trying to save our democracy in our United States of America, when we know that our democracy is being threatened. So close to Virginia, there in Washington, D.C., where we had that insurrection on January the 6th. So, oh my God, when we think about everything, not just the symbolism, but this is real. This is real, that we have to save our democracy. And when we think of what happened in the state of Virginia, what it means to our government here, you know, Thomas Jefferson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you know, the Bill of Rights, and these are the things that we are fighting for right now. We're fighting to keep our democracy alive. So it fills my heart with joy to think, well, Virginia, the state of Virginia is becoming more like the state of California, where I am at, where we have probably the best of voting procedures anywhere in the country. And so many of the laws that are being passed that are really laws where we're talking about social justice. Yes, this is what it is. It's about social justice. And we've got to keep that momentum going. And so when we think of the state of Virginia, we shouldn't think, I'm in California, it doesn't affect me. It does, because we know that we are one nation, and what happens in one state affects all of our other states. And we've got to keep going forward. We cannot let these people that want to destroy our democracy, that want to destroy government, we could not let them take control. And so this is why it's so important that we bring Terry McAuliffe back as governor of the state of Virginia. And again, get all of the Democrats also elected so that they can keep that majority that they have now. It is so crucial, not just for Virginia, but for all of us all throughout our United States of America. Si se puede. We can get out there. We can make it happen. Thank you.
Just want to take a moment to really kind of welcome everybody who's dialing in from around what we call the DMV here, DC, Maryland, Virginia, but also from Florida, also from Chicago, also from Texas and Philly. And again, there's ways that each of you can help. If you want to give us your work, if you want to put your shoulder to the wheel, help Terry McAuliffe win, help Majority Leader Charniele Herring, who's with us today, make sure that they hold on to the Virginia legislature, then please go to pfaw.org/VAGOTV, pfaw.org/VAGOTV. And if you can give your wealth, if you got $5 or $500, we are in the midst of the most expensive spend by People Force membership ever. Try to hold on to our Virginia governorship, and we need your support. We need your support for Last Minute GOTV. We need your support for Last Minute Ads. That's pfaw.org/supportva, pfaw.org/supportva. My grandma, whose grandfather founded Piney Grove Baptist Church down in Surrey County, Virginia, would tell you that it takes work, it takes wealth, it takes wisdom, it takes time, it takes treasure, it takes talent. And we are bringing all of that to bear in Virginia. We played a critical role. One of the few groups who called every single one of its members in California. We played a critical role in helping Gavin Newsom pull out a win when it looked like he might lose just a couple months ago. And now we're doing the same thing for Terry McAuliffe. And I want to bring up Josh San Miguel. Joshua San Miguel is one of our great young leaders here at People for the American Way. He is a young Latino leader from Kentucky who's made Virginia his home and really has the view from the ground. Josh, how do things look in your adopted home of Virginia right now?
Well, Ben, thanks so much for having me on, and I am hopeful. But before we get to that, I just want to take a few minutes just to kind of go over the state of the race here in Virginia with everyone so we can understand sort of some of the historical context of off-year elections in Virginia, where the race stands right now, what's at stake, and how we can actually ensure a progressive victory from the governor's race on down. But I just want to start real quick with a little bit of history. So for decades, the Commonwealth of Virginia has held the first key bellwether election post-presidential, since only Virginia and New Jersey have gubernatorials after a presidential election. Now, New Jersey is more reliably Democratic, of course, although the governor's race is no guarantee there either. I mean, the last time a Democratic governor in New Jersey was reelected to a second term was almost 50 years ago, in 1977. I mean, that's the state that elected Chris Christie after all. But of course, we're here to talk about Virginia, where we're really coming down to the wire. The last time that Virginia elected a Republican statewide was in 2009, just after President Obama's first election. In 2013, the once and hopefully future governor, Terry McAuliffe, actually bucked historical trends and won that election by just about 2 percentage points. Now, keep in mind, he was running against former Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli. He's a right-wing extremist who openly doubted President Obama's citizenship. He wanted to ban abortion in the Commonwealth and pledged to deport each and every undocumented Virginia in this state. And so some folks assume that just because Terry has done that before that he can do it again. But that is a very dangerous assumption. Preliminary data actually suggests there's a lagging enthusiasm gap among Democrats, so there has been up to this point. Now, there always tends to be a drop-off in the enthusiasm in the party that controls the White House. We know that, particularly in the first year after the election. However, that effect seems to be exacerbated by a general fatigue among progressive activists and our base, who have given every ounce of will that they had seemingly to kick Trump out of the White House, and many of whom aren't yet seeing the return on investment, I think, from the White House that we're hoping for just yet. So folks have been fatigued. But let's take a look at the numbers right now here in Virginia. First of all, while Joe Biden trounced Donald Trump in the race for the White House, he earned more votes than any nominee in history. Donald Trump won the second most votes of any candidate in history. More than Hillary Clinton in 2016, more than his own 2016 totals. So Republicans down ballot actually voted in huge numbers, and that includes here in Virginia, given that they had an historically unpopular president at the top of the ticket. But Democrats barely held on to the House, as we know, and they tied in the Senate. It was the smallest gain for a new president's party in modern history. But the polling here in Virginia in particular, the 538 average in August had McAuliffe leading Youngkin by 7 or 8 points. We were coming out of the conventions at that point. That gap has steadily closed since. There was a new Emerson poll that just came out yesterday showing the two candidates tied 49 to 49. And this is not an outlier. 6 days ago, Monmouth had the candidates dead even at 46-46. Trafalgar Group has them at 48-48. CBS and Fox News both have their own polls showing the two of them in a dead heat within the margin of error. So this could be the closest statewide race that Virginia has ever seen. But let's zoom in a little bit further now. There's a story in Virginia politics, many stories, but one of them is about demographics and geography and political realignment. And look, it's a diverse state. In Northern Virginia, we know Terry is going to win this region. So it's just a question of by how much. Democrats have gradually solidified their grasp on Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax County, Loudoun County, Prince William County to some degree. Since 1990, much of the Northern Virginia suburbs have actually gone from about 15 to 20% people of color in some places to upwards of 60, 70, and 80% folks of color. This has undoubtedly led to some progressive gains across Virginia. But hold on a sec. A lot of folks say demographics are destiny. I don't necessarily buy that. Trump actually increased his and his party's share of the Black and Latinx vote over his totals in 2016. So we can't take this for granted. Joe just made up the difference with some, suburban voters of color, some white suburban voters, particularly those with college degrees. So we cannot take for granted that voters of color are going to show up and that they will show up for Democrats. We have to show up for them. We have to show up in their communities. We have to listen. We have to address their needs. We have to organize, and we have to deliver. So that's Northern Virginia. So if you'll humor me for just another couple moments, I want to take a look at a couple of the regions of the state. One is Southern and Southwestern Virginia. This is solid Trump territory. The question here is how enthusiastic are those voters? Are they going to turn out for Glenn Youngkin? Can we sort of offset those numbers a little bit? And then there's Central Virginia and the Eastern Shore. In Virginia's 7th congressional district, the Richmond suburbs, Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger has won her last 2 elections by a mere 2%. In the Hampton Roads region, Representative Elaine Luria won hers by a slightly larger margin, but she was running against a pretty terrible Republican nominee whose campaign actually committed voter fraud. So these districts are key indicators for a number of reasons, but in my mind, it comes down to 2 things. One is they include rapidly developing and diversifying suburbs, and they have significant Black and brown populations. And in addition, the percentage of foreign-born Virginians has actually skyrocketed in recent years as well, and it now stands at 14% of the total population. So these new dynamics are not only key in the statewide and the congressional races, of course, they have enormous implications on down-ballot races, as Leader Herring well knows. All 100 seats this year in the House of Delegates are also up next Tuesday. And just as we expect Joe Biden's numbers to have an effect on the governor's race, Terry McAuliffe's performance will likely have a pretty direct effect on those state house races too. So as you know, Democrats currently hold a 55 to 45 seat advantage, which is historic. We got here for a number of reasons, because of both diversification and political engagement, but also because of a clear anti-Trump backlash in those suburbs that we're talking about. The suburbs are where the Democrats have made most of their gains in the House. We're talking Prince William County, Loudoun County, Henrico, Chesterfield, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, all formerly Republican or Republican-leading regions that trended blue to varying degrees over the last few elections. So if they revert back to the mean and buck some of these Democratic gains, the Virginia GOP, which is more radical than ever, could actually take control back of that chamber. And Leader Herring spoke a little bit about what's at stake here. So, more specifically, we're looking at Republicans targeting some of the last few rural Democrats, including Chris Hurst and Blacksburg, a few vulnerable suburban Democrats like Joshua Cole in Fredericksburg and Kelly Converse Fowler in Virginia Beach. So all of this is to say this thing is really damn close. In 2017, there was actually a state house race that came to an exact tie. Those of you, from Virginia, I'm sure remember that. They drew names out of a hat to determine who the winner was of that race. I'm not making this up. I'm not joking. In 2019, Democratic delegate Nancy Guy actually defeated the incumbent Republican in her district by 27 votes. So again, the entire state house is up this year. If the GOP takes the state house and the governor's mansion, we're in big trouble. I mean, Glenn Youngkin has actually said that so-called what he calls election integrity is his number one issue. And I think we know what that's code for. He's a Trump acolyte. He's a wannabe. He actually said that Trump represents so much of why he's running in the first place. He was caught on tape near the beginning of this race saying that he would attempt to crack down on abortion rights, but he just can't talk about it too much on the trail because he might lose some independent voters. So if this man wins, he's going to try to remake Virginia into, the direction that Texas is headed and destroy women's rights, LGBTQ rights, labor rights, impede criminal justice reform efforts, harm voting rights, and much more. So I promise I'm going to wrap up here in a sec, but I don't want to leave you on a down note, right? That all sounds really depressing. There's a lot that can go wrong here, but I haven't lost hope. Just weeks ago, as was mentioned, we saw Governor Newsom of California crush the opposition in his recall election. After, less than a month before the election, polls suggested it was a tied up race. But organizers, including Dolores, including so many other grassroots organizers all over the country who stepped at the plate, progressive organizations, coalition forces, donors, canvassers, volunteers, they kicked it into gear and they reminded Democratic voters what was at stake. And they saved the state from the specter of a far-right nationalist seizing power in that progressive bastion of California. So it's no surprise that People For has been focusing on Virginia this session, and we're fighting like hell to elect Democrats up and down the ballot. We have to energize Virginia Democrats and remind them that there is a crucial election going on. We have to communicate with voters of color, especially Black and Latinx Virginians in the suburbs and in working class communities and in urban areas. Listen to their needs. Show them that Glenn Youngkin is nothing more than an extension of Donald Trump. Our organizing efforts, keeping ads on the air, talking to voters, and getting them to the polls is critical. But we can't do it without all of you who are tuned in. And I mean that. So, we're going to have the links popping back up in the chat, back up on the screen. So please follow that links. No matter where you are in the country, you can call in and you can talk to voters. You can give what you can. If you're able to, you can come knock doors. We need every single person to help us make a difference in this state, in this election, and help save democracy here in the great Commonwealth. Ben, back to you.
Thank you, Josh. Joshua San Miguel, one of our great young leaders here at People for the American Way. He's been on the team here for more than 4 years, doing incredible work with our young elected officials and pitching in on our political work as well. I really want to just emphasize what Josh said. There is a lot at stake. Trump's movement, as I said at the beginning, is really blowing a hateful wind across Virginia. Coming up as a young organizer, and I've been wearing a Pittsburgh hat basically since the Chuck D days. But coming up as a young organizer, when we would talk about unlikely voters, it was always about Black voters, brown voters, the code, unlikely voters. Poor Black and brown folks, they don't turn out often. But if we turn them out, we win. Well, I'm here to tell you, there are unlikely voters of every color, and there have always been more unlikely white voters. And those voters, unlikely white voters, they typically don't turn out for a Romney. They don't turn out for somebody who's corporate. They loathe corporate America. It has betrayed them over decades. It shut down their factories. It has driven their family from being in good union jobs to hoping to get a job at Walmart. But they do turn out for Ronald Reagan, and they turn out for Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they turn out for Jesse the Body Ventura, and they turn out for Donald Trump. There's a movement that's been built essentially by B-rate actors on the right-wing side who are able, through their name recognition and their common touch, appeal to common folk who feel like they've been forgotten by both parties and left behind. And that's what Glenn Youngkin is praying for. What's scary in Virginia isn't just that this is tied. What's scary is about really the sense that there is momentum amongst unlikely voters on the conservative side in a way that there's not on our side. Folks on our side look at a Terry McAuliffe and say, he won before, he'll likely win again. Terry's a rich guy, he's got all the resources he needs. Not really understanding the most important thing any candidate needs is their vote, is them building a movement inside their house to turn out more folks. And that's what, when you get on the phones for us, when you go to pfaw.org/VAGOTV, that's what you're doing. You're on the phone helping people understand just how important it is to them, the stakes that are available, the stakes in this race, and the need for them to build a movement amongst their friendship network. They know their friends, they know their family members who are unlikely to vote. And that's what you're doing, is helping them understand what's at stake here. Youngkin is very, very scary. He's a very rich man who's dumped a lot of his fortune into this race, simply trying to help the Trump movement take Virginia. And that, Virginia was the staging ground for the insurrection. That's where most of those folks gathered before they came into D.C., killed police officers, desecrated the U.S. Capitol, tried to kill Democratic congresspeople. I mean, really insane stuff. And what our researchers at Right Wing Watch will tell you is that historically, throughout the world, the best predictor of an eventually successful coup is a recently failed coup. The best predictor of an eventually successful insurrection is a recently failed insurrection. And that's why it's so ominous that Donald Trump had people pledging allegiance to a flag carried in the insurrection at the rally for Glenn Youngkin. What did Glenn Youngkin say? Thank you. Great to see you. Please vote for me. Youngkin brags about the support he gets from the anti-abortion movement. Youngkin has said that he won't say clearly what he intends to do because he doesn't want to lose independence. This isn't about so much about keeping Democrats in power. Let's be clear to the independents on the phone, this is about stopping Trump's movement. Last year, we all came together to stop Trump. This time, we all need to come together to stop Trump's movement. Now, if you don't have time to give your work, or if you just have more money you want to give beyond your work because you're all in, or if all you got time to give is just some cash to help turn folks out, help buy those last minute ads, please go to pfaw.org/supportva, pfaw.org/supportva. And now we're going to come into the part I look forward to the most, which is the conversation here. So let's bring everybody on screen and let's get into a conversation, all our speakers on screen, and let's get into a conversation with all the activists, all the donors, all the members of the People for the American Way family that are on this call about how we can each do our part to make sure that Terry McAuliffe wins. Hala Ayala becomes the first Latina to be the lieutenant governor of Virginia, to make sure that Mark Herring and his very stable leadership continues in the Attorney General's office, that justice-seeking leadership in such a critical office as a top prosecutor in the state. And then Charniele Herring continues to be the majority leader. I got to tell you, I'm very proud. I'm a descendant of not one, but two Black Reconstruction statesmen in Virginia. The white supremacist movement there wiped them off the map of politics in Virginia for over 60 years. And it was that movement's main tactic for doing so were state-level voter suppression laws, something that Glenn Youngkin has promised to bring back to Virginia, something that Charniele Herring has shown real courage in overturning the old ones, and is doing everything she can to keep Glenn Youngkin and the conservatives in the Virginia legislature, from far right-wing conservatives, from doing again. So thank you, everybody, for joining this call. Let's get into the conversation. What is being done to help raise awareness about this election in Black communities, and what can we do to help? That's from Betty in Fruitland Park, Florida. Betty, I'll start, and then I'll go right to Charniele. We were just down there for Souls to the Polls. First day of Sunday voting ever in Virginia. We were gathered, a bunch of Black church leaders and Black political leaders and a whole rainbow of other folks, very excited that this was the first time this was happening. Something we take pride in at People For, because Reverend Tim McDonald, our co-chair, one of Dr. King's youngest acolytes, started the Modern Souls to the Polls movement here at People for the American Way 26 years ago, working with advocates like Marge to help pass Sunday voting across the country. See it come to the old cradle of the Confederacy is very, very exciting. And we really praise Charniele Herring for her leadership on that. Charniele, tell us what's going on the ground. And Josh, feel free to chime in too.
Right. Well, just like you mentioned, the Souls to the Polls, but we're also visiting barbershops, beauty shops, and just being on the ground and asking. And I know this question came from Florida. So how you can help us, if you know people in Virginia, is to just call, just make sure that they're voting, and spread the message about what we have done in the Commonwealth of Virginia, especially for voting rights, and that the need is there that we continue and that we protect voting rights. But it is definitely personal touches that are happening in African-American communities. And one of the things I will say, it's just not on election season, and this is what I'm proud of our members, is that they have continually had town halls, either virtually by Zoom or in person safely, but just having conversations with African-American voters continuously, so that our voters have been engaged and remain engaged.
Thank you, Charniele.
Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the things we're doing here at People For, what your money as People For supporters is going to, is buying the biggest ad spend we've ever made on Black radio in Virginia, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Similarly on Spanish language TV and radio, hundreds of thousands of dollars, all coming from you, from our members, from our supporters across the country. What is really the biggest battle we've seen in Virginia, the highest stakes battle we've seen in a very long time. Josh, what are you seeing on the ground, your perch in Northern Virginia?
I mean, I think one of the most critical things that is making a difference is something that Leader Herring touched on, which is engaging folks where they are. So I think that has proven to be effective when you're, when you're trying to reach, a community like the African-American community, the Black community here in Northern Virginia. Again, like I sort of talked about, one of the, in my little spiel earlier, is that in order to make sure that we have, that we keep our gains here, is we have to make sure that we're actually engaging folks and not taking them for granted. So like what Leader Herring said about going to barbershops and communities, there's a really, really successful local elected official here who's running again for an office here on the school board, who is showing up every single day in like historically Black neighborhoods and communities, and so that these folks who may otherwise have been ignored by the system know this guy by his first name. So I think as long as we are doing, putting in the legwork and not just paying lip service, but actually listening and engaging folks where they are, coming into their communities where they are, I think that's going to make the biggest difference. And also showing, like, over the last few years, since Democrats have sort of had full control just over the last few years of state government, showing what we have managed to accomplish, showing how Sunday voting affects their lives, showing how higher wages affects folks' lives. So that, I think that messaging is critical.
Yeah, and that's been, I think, really important, just to get the voices of everyday Virginians out there talking about what's at stake and the gains that have been made. Let's go to our next question. Can you tell us more about what you're doing on the ground in Virginia's Latinx communities? That's Amy from Arlington. Amy, we, again, biggest ad spend we've ever made. Again, getting the voices of everyday Virginians out there about what's at stake. Building on the great work that Dolores Huerta did with us the first time Terry was on the ballot. Dolores, can you just talk about, as you're preparing to come into the state, why it's so important to you to travel across the country to talk to Virginia's Latino voters, and what why you're so hopeful about the role that they can play and have played in the state's politics?
Well, as I said before, it was the Latino vote that was able to guarantee the election for Terry McAuliffe when he first ran for governor. And they were also a crucial vote when Ralph Northcamp was elected for governor also. And so we want to continue that momentum and just, go back and remind them of all of the great benefits that they got many of them which were mentioned earlier by Ms. Herring, that actually benefited the Latino community. So, we've just got to go out there. Now, the Republicans have been investing a lot of money into the Latino community. And of course, they are highlighting the issues of abortion and gay marriage. We know we have a lot of Latinos who are Catholic. We have Latinos who are parts of the evangelical churches. And so we've just got to go out there and remind them that they've got to separate these issues, from so that they don't vote against their own self-interest. And the Latino community, they always come late to the party. Okay, they never RSVP, and when they show up, they bring 5 people that were not invited. We have some bad cultural habits in the Latino community. So, we want to go out there and remind them how important it is for them to get Terry McAuliffe to get elected again as governor, so that we can sustain some of the benefits that they actually were the beneficiaries of so much of what Terry McAuliffe and Ralph Northcup and all of the Democratic delegates there at the Virginia House, what they did benefited the Latino community. So sometimes, we kind of live in a Mac world and people forget. So we have to go back there and remind them, okay, you got this benefit, you know how you got it because you got it from these Democratic governors. And so we want to make sure that we continue that movement towards social justice for the Latino community. The Latino community has been under such brutal attack, as we know, by the Trump administration, that a lot of people, they feel discouraged. We know all of the stuff that's happening at the border. And we have, of course, in the state of Virginia, we have a lot of former refugees, from El Salvador and other places like that. And so we just have to remind them of who they are, the benefits that they have received from the Democratic Party, and why it's important for them to really get out and vote. We know they always come out at the last minute, so we're going to say, and it's not too late. We can make this. And not only that, but it's so critical right now, this moment of reawakening and reckoning that we have in our country right now. And to keep this movement going forward, we're going to need them to come in and to help us not only to vote, but to get their friends and their relatives and everybody that they know to come to the polls, because we are crucial to this election, and they have to understand that they can make the difference and that they will make the difference.
Amen. Amen. And the campaign that Dolores led when Ed Gillespie was on the ballot, and looked like he was about to get 40% of the Latino vote in Virginia. He ended up getting 13% after her No Somos Ratas campaign that we ran here at People for the American Way. Gillespie had been referring to immigrants as rats when he spoke in English language, and praising them when in his ads in Spanish language. And we at People For made sure that his hypocrisy was on full display, not just in ads, but also bird dogging him across the state. And that's the power People For and Dolores Huerta when it comes to just making clear to folks what's at stake here. What's at stake here. I got to say, I'm also really proud of the work that we're doing online, just doing digital outreach to voters. The right wing has gotten very smart about looking for voters who can be moved in Black and brown communities into their column. When you're writing a white supremacist party, you've got to be relentless about finding any person of color to support you. They are having some luck. And people say, why? And what I say to them is, look, they're not just about white supremacy. They're about male supremacy. They're about patriarchy, and they're about national supremacy. And for a lot of men of color, be they Black or brown, they kind of expect politicians to be white men and to be racist. And so their attitude when you talk to them is like, well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I'm down for patriarchy. I'm down for national supremacy. If that guy's a racist, well, kind of, aren't they all kind of racist? And so that's just, the reality that we're dealing with. But with that said, what counters that is talking about freedom. What counters that is talking about dignity and respect and opportunity. And that's why the work that Dolores does, and that we all do here at People for the American Way, to help make sure that voters understand not just what's at stake, but what's already been gained, because of leaders like Terry McAuliffe and Hala Ayala are so important. So important. All right, what's our next question? How can we combat the misinformation that is running rampant about the Virginia election and the candidates? And that's David from Safety Harbor, Florida. I gotta say, between Fruitland and Safety Harbor, Florida has some of the coolest town names I've seen in a long time. David from Safety Harbor, we're all seeking safe harbor for our democracy, especially in Virginia. One of the smart things that we do here at People For is that we get information to people about what's really going on directly to their cell phones. A lot of the disinformation they get through the web and through text messages and social media on their smartphones. And so we make sure that our messages show up there too. Sometimes that's peer-to-peer texting. You sign up at pfaw.org/VAGOTV. You'll likely be pulled into peer-to-peer texting, and you can actually answer people's questions. It was a huge tactic for us in the 2020 election, something we're gearing up to do in a massive way. 2022, Virginia is like our kind of proving ground, our testing ground for all of our 2022 strategies. And it's so important to get the good information to people right where they're receiving the bad information to counter that's on their cell phone. So it's a lot of what we do here at People for the American Way. We also work to get it out through the media. Right Wing Watch's constant vigilant monitoring of far right-wing activity helps us make sure that the media is doing everything they can to combat that disinformation as well. Anyone want to chime in, Marge or Josh? You have any thoughts on that?
No, I think you've hit the nose on the head, Ben. It's really important, and people can play a role themselves. I mean, this disinformation is out there. It's dangerous. It's scandalous. It's really, really harmful. And sometimes the best messenger is you to people you know, saying, "Don't listen to that information. Here's the true story. Here's the true story of book banning. Here's the true story of efforts to prevent people from getting the health care they need. Here's the true story of what you need to do about COVID." So any information that you can get, that we're in the business of making sure that we're highlighting the disinformation, making sure you know about the disinformation, and peer-to-peer texting, or literally just calling the folks that you know and who can influence their neighbors, is really, really, really important. We have to combat it. It's dangerous. And again, as folks have been emphasizing in this call, the choice could not be more stark. The choice could not be more stark in both the gubernatorial election, in terms of the Virginia House elections. We have to win these. We just have to.
Again, you can go to rightwingwatch.org for all our reporting on Glenn Youngkin and the dangerous misinformation he spreads. And the guy is a nut and a nightmare. That is just, I would say, an objective fact. What's our next question, please? What exactly can we do to help win this election in the next 7 days? And that's from Dave in Pasadena, California. Dave, comes down at this stage, really, kind of all the wisdom, time for the wisdom is done. This is all about wealth and work. And what you can do is you can give. We have last minute ads to buy. We have buys to expand coming up, one of our last moments to buy more ads and push them out. We've been combating the negative ads that are designed really to demotivate our voters with positive ads to remind them what's at stake. And that's where your dollars go. And we need your work. We need your time. So again, you can go to pfaw.org/supportva to give, pfaw.org/supportva to give dollars. And you can go to pfaw.org or Bitcoin. You can go to pfaw.org/vagotv, pfaw.org/gotv to give your time. And we need both. If you look at the diversity of this panel, you get a sense of the diversity of People for the American Way. Founded by Barbara Jordan, great crusading Black Congresswoman from Houston, Texas, and Norman Lear 40 years ago to fight the rise of the far right wing. We are at it, and we play a critical role, not just in federal elections, but in state elections across the country. And it's precisely because people like Dave, people like Michael Watson and Silver Jackson, and everybody else on this call, I think all of us yearn to be part of that beloved community that Bayard Rustin talked about, that Dr. King talked about. This is it. That Dolores Huerta helped to make a reality. What a privilege it is to be part of an activist effort with Mrs. Huerta, who Dolores, I got to tell you, is the reason I didn't know what a strawberry tasted like when I was 8 years old. Because my earliest memories of activism were handing out flyers boycotting the growers in places like Salinas and Watsonville, who were exploiting the farm workers in the field when the UFW was organizing my old home county of Monterey, California. So that's what it means to be part of People for the American Way, and what inspiration to see somebody who's an activist, who's not just like talking on Zoom, crisscrossing the country. When Dolores hits the ground, one of the things you help us do with your dollars, you help us bring in folks like Dolores who can capture media attention for a candidate like Terry and inspire people in person and through the media. And when she hits the ground, Dolores pretty much campaigns for about 18 hours a day. It's apparently the secret to a long life full of vitality is just to never stop going. So.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for that, for those allocates. And I hope to see you soon there in Virginia. We're going to be campaigning right down to the last minute to make sure we get every single vote out. And please, everybody, send your donations, make the phone calls into the state of Virginia. We have to win this one, okay? We cannot afford to lose the state of Virginia to the right wingers, to the haters, okay? We are the justice warriors, and we have to keep them back, keep them out of the state house of Virginia. So thank you so much, and thank you very much for inviting me to join this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. And speaking of the last minute, we are 1 minute over. And I know Leader Herron needs to get back to work. Josh needs to get back to campaigning. And Marge needs to get back to fighting the far right wing. And each of you, I know, has something to do. So thank you for joining us from Pasadena, California to Safety Harbor, Florida, to all over the DMV. We thank God for each of you and the great work we're going to do together to make sure that Glenn Youngkin and the Trump movement are stopped in Virginia. Thank you so much. God bless.